Hi, I'm Sarah Shea.
And I'm Strangely Duesberg,
Welcome to the Pilot House.
a podcast where we watch all the shows we missed the first time around.
And try to figure out where the heck they were going with this. So Strangely, what do you know about the Monkees?
I'm not sure I'll be able to say this without offending Monkees fans.
Oh no.
So I know I'm a Believer. That's a Monkees song, right? Then
Yes.
I saw her face. Other than that, I don't know a whole lot about the Monkees specifically. I know that they're like a band of four lads and that they were put together kind of more like the way that like boy bands were put together in the 90s. That they were like created by a studio or a producer or something, as opposed to people who met each other and became a band. I mostly know that because I've heard over the years, like, people will say negative things about the Monkees as being kind of this like bootleg Beatles, like, you know, some other studio or somebody was like, we need a Beatles and we'll have a Beatles every week on this television program. That's not a diss. I'm not making the value judgment. This is just what I've heard about them. And yet, like, sort of with that kind of negative caveat, I do know that quite a few people in my life really love them and think they're very fun.
Okay.
And I'm a Believer. That song's a banger. So, like, I'm interested. But that's all I know about the Monkees.
What do you know about the TV show, though?
That the TV show is where the band comes from. Like, the band was invented for this show.
Got it. Okay.
And the show and the band, it was like the whole package was kind of created, and then like, here is the show. It is also the band, and the show is like, it's sort of a similar vibe to those some of the Beatles movies, where it's like they're a band in the movie, but then they also maybe do some sketches and bits, and it's sort of semi-variety show, semi-plot, semi-something, and like, there's maybe a Muppet Show on stage, backstage, back and forth kind of a deal.
Okay.
So, but all created as like a sort of product. Like, it was all invented at the same time. That's my understanding. I could be totally wrong.
No, I mean, you're not totally wrong. I watched a lot of this show in reruns on Nick at Night. Is one of them
named Davey? Sorry, I just remember that.
Yes.
One's named Davey?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt.
There's one of them is named Davy Jones, and that is the reason David Bowie had to change his name, because his real name is David Jones.
Huh.
Yeah, he couldn't be David Jones. There already was one. Anyway, fun fact for you. Anyway, yes, I watched a lot of the show when it was on the Nick at Night's Block Party Summer. For those, if you know, you know. Monkey Mondays. I watched marathons of the Monkees on Mondays for a whole summer and absolutely fell in love. Mickey is my monkey. So I actually also know a lot about just the history of it and like how it came together and all that stuff. Do you want me to tell you all of that, or would you rather we kind of go into this and then I can get into more of that when we're talking about it afterwards?
I'd like to go in as fresh as possible.
Okay, all right. That's why I asked. So I will give you some more details about the background and where everything came together after you've seen the actual show itself. All
right. Is there anything else that you want to sort of get on record before we go back to revisit this?
Oh God, I remember. I feel like I remember it so well that I don't want to. I could spend 20 minutes talking about all the things I remember from the show, and I don't want to spoil that for you.
Okay.
So I'll talk about if there's anything that's significantly different. I've certainly, to my knowledge, never seen the pilot. Mm-hmm. So it could be quite different from how I remember the show, but I can go into that after we've seen it. Because, I used to watch it when they were just doing marathons on TV. They never showed things, they rarely showed them in order, much less starting from the beginning. So whether I've even seen anything from the first handful of episodes or from the first season, I don't know. So things could be different from what I'm expecting. But yeah, for cute lads who are in a band and have shenanigans. I mean, that is the brief. So let's just get into it.
Sounds good.
Well, the cupboard's bare, and it's not about to get any fuller unless we play a gig.
No, I don't want to buy a princess phone. I'm trying to locate a princess. Princess Bettina.
Do you know we haven't worked in a month?
Gee, it seems more like 4 weeks.
Look, I don't care what colors they come in, and I don't care what they do when you pick the phone up. Will you please look under harmonica? H-A-R-M. Look, it's a country. There is so.
Hey, Davey, you talking about a chick? Her name is Bettina, and she's a princess.
That's right.
And she's here with her uncle, the Archduke.
Otto.
Yeah, Otto. Yeah, and a bodyguard.
Yeah, Sigmund.
Nah. That one's Igor. Must be a different princess.
Hey, fellas, yeah, it's her. They says she's staying at the Ritz Swank Hotel. Come on, fellas, we've got to go.
Hey, wait a minute. You can't go there.
Look, they're trying to kill her.
How do you know?
Look, I know. The guy threatened to kill me, too.
What did he say?
They said, Oyanka Kimbo Kuamba Kumasini.
What in the world does that mean?
Well, it doesn't mean live and be well.
Davey, look, man. You cannot go down to the Ritz Swank Hotel and barge in there on a suspicion.
Look, will you trust me? She's got my jacket.
Oh, well, she's got your jacket.
Yeah.
She's got his jacket.
She's got his jacket.
She's got his jacket.
Okay, so we just watched episode 1 of The Monkees, Royal Flush. Technically, there was a pilot that was released later as an episode of the show, but...
And the pilot that was released was re-edited to be an episode in the series, so...
Yeah.
What was released wouldn't necessarily reflect how this would have looked as a pilot anyway.
Yeah, I'm still curious to see. I said I almost wish we'd watched that episode just because this episode does not do a lot to introduce the concept of the Monkees. It kind of launches right into a plot. But
which for me, in terms of selling something like this, I mean, it could be benefit of hindsight that I've seen a lot of Beatles, that I'm sort of aware of this kind of thing, this sort of package. Mm-hmm. And in terms of what we were right and wrong about, sort of my basic conceptualization of this as being a band that has hijinks, on stage, backstage kind of thing, it was exactly what I was picturing.
Okay.
I mean,
what, really? There was nothing about that surprised you?
No, I mean, especially because of the comparison to some of the Beatles films like A Hard Day's Night, where it's sort of like the band is running around having hijinks.
Yeah.
And nominally they're a band and like they're talking about gigs and things, but it's sort of just like the here are the lads.
I'm looking at you with a look of utter confusion on my face because that was so much more bonkers than even I remembered. And you're acting like it's like, yeah, pretty much what I expected. Hard Day's Night. I've seen it all. Like, that was not more and wackier than you were expecting?
Well, I did not have a wackiness level that I was expecting. It was very wacky, but I have not experienced this before. This is my first blush of seeing this.
Yeah, but still, all right, I'm a little disappointed. I thought you were going to be like, what the heck? That was crazy. It's a weird show.
It is a very weird show, but I have seen weird shows before. I'm sorry that if I don't quite seem like as floored by this. Some of the, I guess the comparisons that I'm drawing to, not as much A Hard Day's Night. There's another Beatles film called Help, where they have a lot of bizarre things happen. Like they're skiing in the Alps and then the lake breaks open and a guy that they've seen swimming multiple times comes out of the ice. So like sort of some of the more fantastical elements of this, I've seen other sort of 60s weirdo productions where weird stuff happens.
Yeah.
If I sound unenthused, it's not that I'm unenthused. The parts of this were really funny and some of the sight gags genuinely got me, but I genuinely went into this without any expectations. So I think the level of bonkers madcap that happened might not have struck me as much just because I didn't expect it not to be goofy. And so it was really goofy and very fun. So it just like, it didn't surprise me in its goofiness. because I didn't know what to expect at all.
Yeah,
I had a
I guess
genuinely good time watching it though.
I have such fond memories of this show. And then it was like, oh my gosh, I forgot it was this bonkers. I forgot the level. So I was delighted to be reminded of like how cuckoo banana pants it gets. And so, yeah, I was just like, oh boy, here we go. This is going to be a wacky episode of Pilot House. And you're just more kind of like, yeah, about what I expected. If I expected anything, I guess that's it. And I'm like, oh, okay. It reminds me of the time I was hanging out with a younger friend of mine. Not that this is an age thing in this case, but she's like 10 years younger than me. And they were talking about music. And I went, oh my God, let me play you this band that I was really into in high school. And I was like, this band is so good. It's a local band. I still think they're amazing. And like, I put them on and I'm like, I'm going to blow her mind. I'm going to be like this cool older friend introducing her to shit she's never heard. And I turned it on and like 30 seconds in, she kind of chuckles. And I'm like, what's funny? And she goes, oh, nothing. It's good. It's just so 90s. It's funny. And I'm like, okay, well, this moment is ruined. Be gone. No, I did not banish her. We're still friends. But I was like, okay, this is not the moment I thought it was going to be. I guess I'm too blinded by my childhood love of this show that I thought it was going to be more fun.
I genuinely had a very good time with this.
Yeah.
It just, I don't have any memories of the Monkees.
Yeah, I guess I just was expecting more of a what did I just watch reaction from you. I guess it's not as crazy as I thought.
Yeah, well it's so interesting because there is a genuine madcap energy to this that I think is very endearing. And it does remind me a lot of the wilder parts of something like Help, the Beatles film, which I know you haven't seen.
Yeah.
But
I've seen Hard Day's Night about 50 times. For whatever reason, I've never watched Help.
yeah, and Help definitely has sort of that like that free energy. That something started to happen, I feel like, in a lot of art, particularly film and television things in the 60s, where it was like, I think maybe a new generation sort of came to the fore. It was around the same time that Jim Henson started getting noticed and getting things produced. And it's like the idea that you could really, really surprise people and have something super wacky happen. And like the sudden costume changes based on the bits that they're doing in this were really fun. Like when they're planning to sneak into a hotel and all of a sudden they're all dressed as army dudes.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That's like the first really wacky thing. Mm-hmm. Like when you see, it starts with Davy sitting on a beach and then he sees a girl going out into the waves with like a inflatable raft. And you're just like, okay, sure. 60s boy band beach stuff.
Yeah.
And then, like, a cartoonish villain with a cartoonish henchman starts setting up a telescope. And you're like, wait, what is going on here? Yeah. And then it's still, you're like, okay, who are these characters? These guys are a little more bonkers than I was expecting. But then when you get back to the house and the boys are kind of, there's a few lines just to kind of set you up of like, well, we're broke. We've got to play a gig. You realize I haven't worked in a month? You know, like you get, that's all of the exposition you get of we're a band who's trying to make a living off being musicians. Like that was the thing that really surprised me about this and made me go, this cannot be the pilot. Because there's very little talk about them being a band. The fact that they're a band figures not at all into the actual plot of the episode. But then you're just seeing them and he's talking and it's a little bit funny. They're doing bits with each other, but it's normal comedy stuff. And then he's finally like, we have to break into this hotel and save this princess who someone's trying to kill. And suddenly it is a cartoonish parody, costumes and props and everything, of like a British war movie. And Mickey Dolenz is doing an almost unintelligible British accent.
We'll infiltrate the compound under cover of daylight. And set him an observation post. Here.
Like, Matt Gorley, eat your heart out.
Stiff upper lip and all that.
And it's very endearing. Because they're all so young and fresh-faced. And then they're like trying to play these like very like arch, like manly man characters. But they're just like so cute. And especially Davy, he's like so yiddle. And
he is quite very yiddle.
Yeah.
You like that little bit at the end? It's like, you're not short. Stand up. Show them how tall you are. I am standing up. Like, he's in on it.
Yeah.
What I love about it is that in that way, he's kind of the Ringo, because he's sort of being teased, but he's also clearly the heartthrobbiest.
Yeah.
Like, he's the one who gets to save the princess, right?
Right. That is a very fun combination of high status, low status. In terms of sort of the initial four, they do have a lot of fun interplay. The other three weren't as well established in terms of this plot, but is that something that throughout the series elsewhere, do they each get like featuring episodes, or is it usually kind of like Davy is the...
No. I mean, at least from my memory, which I have not watched an episode of the show in 20 years, probably. Maybe more. But my memory of it is that they're all pretty equal in the episodes. Part of why I was very surprised when it started with just Davy on the beach.
Right.
But also because, again, I'm expecting this to be a pilot and to be establishing our characters, establishing our boys as a struggling band. But yeah, he is not the star of the show appreciably, in my memory, anyway. Then again, Mickey Dolenz was always my favorite, so he was the star of the show in my heart. But yeah, it's if you don't mind, I just realized we forgot to really establish the what we were right about, wrong about thing, which I wanted to at least cover something that you were wrong about that I didn't want to get into because I kind of wanted to just get into the show and let you see it. It wasn't anything you said specifically, but kind of an implication, and this is a common thing. I thought this too, that the show is created as a vehicle for this boy band so that they could be a boy band. But really the original idea was to have a television show about a band, and the creator had this idea for several years before he was able to get it going. It was really, I think Hard Day's Night was the first Beatles movie. Whatever's the first Beatles movie was the thing that finally made networks go, say, what about that boy band TV show that guy was telling us about? Like, no one would really thought it was viable until they saw that and they went, oh no, girls do want a band to come right into their homes, you know? But their original plan was to use an existing band.
Oh, really?
That was the whole idea. And if I'm not misremembering, I think The Lovin' Spoonful was the first choice. They hadn't become a hit yet. And then they had their first hit, and the record label that they were assigned to was like, oh, you want them to be on a show? We're going to have to pay us a whole bunch of money to use their music. Right. And the network went, why don't we just make a band? Then they'll be ours and we'll own the music and we'll make... If we're going to make a TV show that catapults this band into some limelight here, we might as well be making the money off the music as well. So that's when they set out to create the band. So it just an interesting story that not that many people know.
Right.
That the original idea was not to make a band so they could make money off of a manufactured boy band. So they're less of a manufactured band in that sense, but they certainly were cast for the show. And they did, I think the casting, So
they were a band already before the show?
No, sorry. They created the band for the show. But they were manufactured to be in the show, and then they were like, and then hopefully people will like the music as well. Yeah. Like, that was less of a focus initially.
The music. Less of a focus. Okay.
There were going to be songs, but they kind of, they didn't think like, let's make a band. Oh, and let's also make a TV show. Let's make a TV show. Well, I guess it makes the most sense if we also create the band for it. So
they made a TV show that they intended to feature a band, and when they couldn't get a band, they're like, I'll do it myself.
Yeah. So they created the band. In fact, the first handful of songs they recorded, the boys were just singing the songs. They had not written them. They weren't playing instruments. Right. They just were recording the vocals, right? But then they released an album. The network released an album that's with all the songs that said, like, the Monkees. It looked like an album by a band. It did not look like the soundtrack to a TV show. And the guys were actually upset this was not what they understood was going to happen. And they were
Right.
like, you can't just imply that we're a real band if you're not going to let us also be a real band.
Right.
Like, if you want us to be a band, let us write songs and let us play the instruments and let's do this for real. Like, we thought we were just being in a show then singing some songs because we were going to be a band in the show. But, like, you can't be doing this, like, this play acting of we're being a band unless we are. So, yeah, it's an interesting factor about that I didn't know until fairly recently, within the last year or two.
Well, hearing all of that, it kind of makes sense that at least initially they're it's maybe not focusing on them playing gigs and like it's
right, yeah,
because if at least initially they're not a gigging, they're not capable,
right, yeah,
of playing gigs.
I think they all. I mean, it was. I think the casting call said something like, sprightly young boys wanted, must be able to sing like instruments of plus or something like that.
Why are you
right?
reading my Tinder profile right now?
But I've actually seen some footage of the audition sessions, which is fascinating if you're a fan of the show. Just FYI, look on YouTube; they're out there. Both interviews with the individual guys and then acting out some scenes with various other actors who had been considered. So there's like this one scene, and you can find a video on YouTube where it shows that scene done twice in a row with different groups, and like I think two of the final band are in each of those, but then there's other guys, and like one of the bits is them in a record store checking to see if any of their albums have been bought. So like it's not them playing a gig, but it does focus around them being a band. There's like it's very funny because in at least one of those bits that they recorded, Peter Tork is given some of the kind of sarcastic lines, and it's like that is not his character on the show. He's mostly the kind of like, oh, okay, all right, let's do the thing, guys. Like, yeah. It's my extensive knowledge surrounding it aside is fun.
It's very fun. I was actually surprised by how much I enjoyed it. Like I know that I sounded unenthused just because it was definitely vibing on sort of a 60s madcap TV show kind of level, and I think that didn't surprise me just because I didn't know what to expect. And then once we got into it, I was like, oh, okay, we're going to be doing this and we're doing bits. So I figured out what kind of show it was pretty quickly, and then rolled with it. But the thing that was most surprising to me was that I actually enjoyed it and found the bits funny. Something, anytime you watch comedy that's more than 10 seconds old, it risks like feeling aged, or you've seen the bits a million times, and especially looking at something like this that clearly was very influential on television and other kinds of comedy for the next, this is going on 60 years old now. Just thinking about shows like The Young Ones, or even Mitchell and Webb, Peep Show, like any of that kind of stuff, you can see the DNA of this through a lot of British television comedy all the way up to the present day. And even as someone who's been to Edinburgh Fringe Festival and seen just small British comics working, it's like, things in this just feel a part of culture now. Yeah.
And honestly, the fact that you compared it to The Young Ones makes me really happy, because that first moment when they're in the house, and it's like this dingy kind of, you don't see it. There's a lot of like wacky stuff on the walls and whatever, but it's a little bit dingy. And you hear Mike say like, "We got no food in the cupboards. We got to play a gig." And I went, "Oh my gosh, The Young Ones all over again." Because I watched The Young Ones obviously much later than, I guess not obviously, but I discovered The Young Ones in college. And that never occurred to me that it was sort of Monkees-esque until coming back to the Monkees and going like, oh yeah, it's like a bunch of boys living in this rundown house, except in The Young Ones, they're students, not, a band. But like, there's musical segments in The Young Ones, and there's like weird bits where suddenly people are wearing crazy costumes and there's crazy props. Like, there's so much of this in The Young Ones that I never connected to it until now.
Yeah, and I think, some of that sort of apparent lack of surprise or shock at the zaniness of this was because things like that were going through my mind as I was watching this. And because I don't have the nostalgia of watching it when I was young, it's more exciting to me as like a progenitor of so many of these things that I love. It's like they were doing this. It's that joy of finding something where they're doing a thing you like a decade before you thought anyone was doing the thing.
Yeah.
And you can tell that some of the people who are working on it, for them, it's fresh and new and exciting. And like, oh, we get to do this. We get to do like the cutaway in the big finale where they're having the duel and there's the couple and they're sort of sharing a glass of they're just having a glass of champagne.
They're drinking champagne. They're eating like canapes and they're kind of like looking at each other while they're eating, and it's that thing you've seen a million times where people are kind of making their eating sort of sensual as they look at each other,
and then it just escalates to the point that it's like
they're shoving food in each other's faces.
Yeah, like when people get married and sometimes they like feed each other cake and it gets a little messy, but then it just keeps going and then they eat the goddamn plate.
Yes. Oh my god, and that's just a side bit with two throwaway characters who don't have names, and like that, they put that much like ridiculousness into just that little cutaway bit. It's so good. And I gotta say, I mean, I hope you agree with me because you laughed very hard at the moment, but I think the best of the text pops up on the screen gags, which they do a couple of them in the episode, hands down the best one is the first one, and I'm glad they did that one first because it's it gets you.
When he, is it Mikey?
No, they're in they're in the hotel. Yeah. They're trying to get this princess away from her evil Archduke uncle who's gonna kill her. They hide in a linen closet, and then Davy and the princess hide in the linen closet. The other boys, coast is clear. They go get her out of the linen closet and start running down the hall. Peter comes back, opens the linen closet, grabs out a towel, and starts to walk away with it, and it freezes. And on the screen it says, "Everybody does it."
It was so good.
Oh, that's just we both laughed out loud. That was delightful. I'm glad they had the sense to make that the first of the because the other visual on-screen ones like the "we've got to stop meeting like this," they weren't wasn't quite as good as that one.
Yeah, I'm so curious about those. Is that something that they're just like, oh, let's add the like. Was that a something that they came up with in post, or was it like written with the intent of doing that later? Because that was the moment that for me this moved from okay, we're doing comedy and we're kind of doing these little aside sketches, sort of semi-fantasy sequences to this show is on a totally different energetic level where it's much more in the realm of a Monty Python or a Young Ones than it is in the realm of more typical sort of sitcom or semi-variety show of the day. Like the on-screen text and like little animations that they put in. Like at one point the evil Archduke is like, wait, aha, and he like has an idea and a glowing light bulb appears
pops up
above
his head. Yeah.
It's a really, really lovely kind of live action cartoon stylization. It makes me think also of the Pink Panther films. If you've seen any of those.
I actually have not. Or if I did, I was too young to remember.
Peter Sellers, they'll do the thing in that where there's a bomb and someone is holding the bomb when it goes off, like right in their face, and then they don't die, they're not even injured, just their clothes are black and tattered.
Right, they've got soot on their face, cartoon style. Yeah.
But again, that was something that was being made back in the 60s.
Yeah.
And that joke is much more tired now, but like at the time it was something that was a little bit more fresh and exciting, and then paved the way for things like Jim Carrey's Mask films or whatever, that kind of like live action cartoon thing that we recognize as a genre wasn't necessarily as much of a genre back in the 60s when things like this were being made.
Yeah. I'm curious whether the text popping up on the screen, that sort of thing, I'm curious if that sticks around because I didn't remember that element at all. That wasn't something I went, I forgot about these. Them changing into crazy costumes, that definitely was I forgot that they did this. Like, genuinely, I knew that their energy was very madcap and, like, zany. And I knew that they got into shenanigans, but genuinely, the second the Archduke, the cartoonish villain, and his cartoonish henchmen first show up on the beach with a giant telescope, I went, oh, that's right. This show does get wacky. Excellent.
And it took a while for me to settle into the fact that it was going to stay at that that volume the whole time. Because, you know, sometimes something will sort of come out the gate swinging, or they'll get a couple of really good gags in.
Mm-hmm.
Or also watching something with so much distance of time, things that weren't intended to appear bizarre, and vice versa. So it's like, how much of this is intentional? And realizing about halfway through at the towel moment, it's like, oh, they know exactly what they're making. It's delightful.
Yeah.
It's not watching some old, 70s movie that's just totally inscrutable because you're not part of 70s culture anymore. It's, it exists and stands on its own as this funny document of some bananas comedy. It is really bananas, some of the things that happen in this.
Oh, yeah. Extreme banana. I'm very curious. So they do this bit in the episode where in order to quickly take over the hotel room directly next to the royal suite, they pretend that Mike is a rich, millionaire or something like that, and they rush into the room and start stamping his monogram all over everything or whatever, and they're calling him WH, and they're stamping that with everything, and the maid who happens to be in the room is like, "What's going on?" And they're like, "Don't you know who that is? That's WH blah blah or whatever." And she's like, "Huh? Who?" And they go, "You've heard of wool hats? Well, that's him." Which is because he wears that hat in every episode. That hat is his trademark, and I actually don't know the story behind why the hat. Maybe they were worried that too many of them were brown haired and might look too much the same, and thought we'll give this one a hat. It was just amazing that in the first episode they're making a joke about the hat. That just seemed wild. How did that read to you? That just go oh sure, he's wearing a wool hat, why not?
Yeah, it just seemed like, I mean, I don't know what the word would be. I'm sure there's a TV tropes term for the style of clown character who always has the right thing in their hand. Mm-hmm. And all the Monkees are definitely that, where it's all of a sudden they have these elaborately painted banners dropping from trumpets that say King Otto.
Right,
when did you have time to make that? They didn't.
No.
They just reached into a box and there it was.
Yeah.
It's like
when they say the way that they get him into the room is to tell him oh yes, we have a showroom for thrones in this hotel. It's right next door. Why don't you come check it out? And immediately they do the bit of, we have to take one of the chairs in this room and make it a throne. Yeah. And they do have suddenly they have gold spray paint and scissors and measuring tape and all of that stuff. They go through the charade of we had all this stuff and we're gonna make this throne, to have the we have to hurry and do this. But yeah, then when he sits in the throne, they're do 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 do, and they have trumpets all of a sudden out of nowhere. It's
Poppins baggers.
Yeah,
I'm gonna call them
Poppins baggers.
Poppins baggers.
Beautiful.
For me, what makes this work so well as selling this concept is that it almost didn't focus on them as a band. I think if this is how you're sort of presenting this package, they are a band, and clearly music that is implied to be their songs is happening in the episode. There's sort of the 2 or 3
there's 2 montage scenes that have a full song going on to them.
So it's you can tell me they're a band and I get it. And also that opening credits thing where it shows them they're playing music and they're doing very, again, I'm not as an insult, but Beatlesy kind of things.
Yes.
They're all shoved in a car.
I mean, the fact that this was capitalizing on the popularity of the Beatles, to say that is not an insult. It is just a statement of fact. They're called the Monkees with 2 E's. It was obviously sort of wink at the Beatles changed the spelling of their name. What if we did it, but it didn't accomplish a pun? It was just Monkees. Sure.
And if you are pitching me that show, I almost want to know that the not a band stuff works more if I'm going to be watching them in a visual medium, and the selling the songs is not as important as selling the vibe and the relationships and the boys.
Yeah.
And this definitely is, if they had made a few episodes and they're actually let's air this one first.
Yeah.
It definitely captures the energy that they're going for and sort of the chemistry of the boys really well.
Did you also did you appreciate there's one thing in this episode that is a particularly dated joke that possibly someone in the Gen Z generation would be like, is that a thing? Is the way that they finally defeat the Archduke in the end is that...
Oh yeah, at the sound of the tone, it will be 12 p.m.
Yeah, well, 12 a.m.
12 a.m. Yeah, but the
right, yeah.
Calling
the whole thing is the princess has no power over her Archduke uncle who's trying to kill her until she becomes the queen when she turns 18, and her birthday is the next day, and they're in the middle of this party, and there's a big fight scene, and finally Peter's like, hey, listen to this, and he holds up a phone that says, at the tone, the time will be 12 midnight, and it's like, haha, she's the queen now.
Is that the thing he was holding up? It was a phone?
Are you joking? Are you teasing?
I'm joking. It was a joke. Because you implied, you're like, a joke that maybe Gen Z people wouldn't get.
Oh! I was like, I don't understand. What's your joke?
I thought we were building a world where I was Gen Z. And I was
know.
I'm so young. Thank you. Did you card me for cigarettes? Thank you.
You're sweet. Yes, haha.
I thought that was great. I loved it. That was like very much a thing of its time. Also, with speaking of phones, when the henchman, the big mustachioed henchman, calls the boss, and he has a radio with like the wire up, but then it's like a rotary phone. He has to dial it.
Yeah, they were clever, and they were like, oh yeah, we'll make it like it's like a phone. What would a phone need to work remotely? Oh, like a radio, so it has an antenna, and it's like you didn't know how close you were to early cell phones. Yeah, he pulls out the antenna and calls him, and I love that they're doing the
sparrow
code.
Has left the nest.
Yeah, and then he suddenly realizes the other person does the wrong code, and he goes, "What?" Like they've gone 4 or 5 back and forth, and suddenly he's like, "I'm sorry, what is the number?" And the person gives him the number. He goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, the wrong number." Oh, it's beautiful.
I always find those like kind of inscrutable code phrases. It's like anytime someone says that, you're like, you're clearly up to something.
Yeah. I guess you don't know necessarily what they're up to. Just saying. The eagle has landed. Who is the eagle? Where did they land? I don't know because I'm not in on the code.
I have more thoughts, but I think a lot of them will come up in the segments unless you want to.
No, yeah, we can go into the segments.
All right, well, let's get into that first segment, which we like to call Where Did the Money Go? In this segment, we talk about where we think they spent the money on this episode, knowing that this wasn't the first episode that they shot, that they shot a pilot and they reused some elements of it later. This feels like the kind of thing where they had ordered it to series, and the pilot that they originally made was probably more of a test kind of thing to like get the mix right, especially hearing that they re-edited it and used other bits of it later. This feels like it arrived very complete. Mm-hmm. Or at least by the time it was being broadcast to audiences. Yeah. That kick-ass Monkees hideout clubhouse is obviously a very good set, though.
I definitely had forgotten that it was on the beach. Mm-hmm. I mean, perfect opportunity for beach shenanigans and girls in swimsuits and things. So. Yeah. But yeah, I wish we'd gotten to see more of the Monkees' house, honestly. You know, it's interesting that you mentioned that because, fun fact, in the 80s, there was an attempt to recapture the magic of the Monkees, and there was a show called The New Monkees. And it was a new band with a new group of 4 boys, and they had an album, and they had a TV show, and it was just like a complete flop. It didn't go. And I think part of it was just because that sort of thing was it's not a guaranteed format, right?
Right.
But also, the house that they live in this, I haven't actually seen this show, but I read a little about it. I think I saw like a little clip of it online. Instead, they went with, what if they lived in this super awesome house that had all these crazy, like, different themed rooms and a robot butler or something like that, and, like, a slide to get into the room. And, like, they went big with this, like, wacky set they thought the kids would like. But then the boys who live in it are going, we're a band just starting out. It's like, I would not be surprised if that was part of why people were like, why do they live in this magic house?
Right.
If they're a new band getting started, that doesn't make sense. And like, I just wouldn't be surprised if that was part of why people didn't click with it. It's like,
just edit a few cutaways that they're like all smoking tons of marijuana and in like a shitty, like, you know, shotgun shack and imagining all of these insane giant rooms.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there were lots of other problems with the show. Not to give a hard time to any of the guys who were involved in it. I'm sure they were nice boys. But yeah, I do own a New Monkees 45. That's how I discovered they existed. I ran across the 45 and I was like, the New Monkees? Are you kidding me? And then when I heard about the show, I was like, oh boy, it gets weirder. But anyway, yeah, I wish we'd gotten to see more of the Monkees hideout, because even though they set it up to be sort of, they live in some sort of squalor, it was like fun squalor.
Right. The squalor that you imagine when you imagine no parents telling you to clean.
Yeah, yeah. And like a bunch of weird, poor artists getting to decorate the place.
Yeah.
Which is sort of, I mean, you and I
we're basically describing our own homes. Like,
yes,
let's be honest.
That's true. Yes, that is basically how we decorate. A couple of kids who were allowed to decorate a house.
Oh.
But yeah, it's I think it's hard to do that, the where the money go thing with when it's a second episode, because maybe they, in the first episode that they actually shot, they spent more time showing off the house set or something.
Mm-hmm. Then again, you know, this is so far removed from how I conceptualize TV production that, you know, the audio recording sessions could have been the huge thing that they splashed out money on, and these sets are just kind of like they're put together from props in a warehouse, and you know, it's very hard to say. Yeah,
they did have 3 songs, including the theme song. Yeah. So they had to actually record some songs in a studio before they could use them in the show. So.
And probably those wigs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Beatles wigs they were all wearing.
The Beatles wigs.
No, I think that's their real hair. I think that's just what boys did at the time. They all look like Blue Boy.
Oh, good Lord. Moving on.
Cliffs and Chips.
In this segment, we go over any predictions we have for the future of the show, particularly season 1 cliffhangers or any relationships we would like to see flourish or develop. Strangely, do you have any thoughts?
I mean, just taking the box that says Tumblr queer theory and just setting it aside. We got 4 beautiful boys living in a house together.
Anything could happen.
4 beautiful boys who are very sensitive artists who love to decorate and dress up in silly costumes together.
Okay, now you're reading my Tinder profile.
It is something that already right out the gate has the energy of, I just want to hang out with these dudes and watch them hang out with each other, and you know, we're just, which in terms of sort of the relationship of, I guess, an audience member in the show, sometimes you watch an old show like this that people love and remember from their childhood, and it's like, I do not get what you got. I do not understand why you're sitting there smiling at me while this is happening. I totally get it.
Yeah.
And I think if I had watched this when I was like a younger teen, especially, I would just be like, this would have been a thing.
Yeah.
For me. I believe it was for my sister, but again, because we didn't have TV at home, it was something she was getting at a friend's house.
Right, yeah.
Because one of the songs in this episode sounded familiar to me as well, and I think my sister would play a lot of their music.
Okay.
So like I get it, like I get the draw and I get the attraction, and like I'm feeling it. I'm like, I'm on this vibe.
So you're saying you ship yourself with all of the Monkees?
Yeah, read my Tinder profile. Young, beautiful boys must play musical instruments.
Not too young.
No,
we're not weirdos. We're not creeps.
No. Sarah, I'm sure you have some very, very strong Cliff predictions. Like, I know there's a deep monkey mythology, and that,
right? Yeah. Well, I wouldn't want to spoil it for you.
Well, that Sweeps Week episode in particular. That.
Oh, sure. No, I mean, this is just, it's shenanigans all the way down. I don't think, from my memory, again, saw it all out of order and everything, but my memory was of shenanigans of the week. Absolutely. Zero things, overarching season plots. Zero, like, significant things changing. It's just these boys being goofballs.
Is this a show where notable guest stars appear, where they, like, other musicians of the day would show up, or was it very much its own little pocket universe?
I have no memory of that, but also, this show was really my introduction to kind of the 60s, I think, in a lot of ways. Well, that's not entirely true. Let me clarify. My parents did listen to oldies radio a lot.
Right.
So if they'd used the songs of an artist from that time period, I would have recognized it, but they definitely didn't do that. Mm-hmm. So whether there were any cameos, I can't say. It doesn't fit with my memory of the show, but I probably it happened once or twice, at least. I mean, just the sort of thing people did. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, I have no memory of any particular that one fun episode. I just remember lots of the boys being goofballs and having weird shenanigans and wearing crazy costumes and loving every second of it. And I ship myself. I ship young me with young Mickey Dolenz. If only we could have met in a perfect world.
Well, Sarah, right now it kind of feels like we're already talking about what the day-to-day of the show will be.
Yeah, we do often end up sliding into it from clips to ship, so let's just get in there.
What will this show be?
This is usually where we get into what will be the day-to-day vibe, if different from the pilot.
But I think we've already covered that.
Yeah. With lots of these earlier shows, there wasn't like that much world building. There wasn't like a crazy concept to set up that they didn't, or rather, when they did have a crazy concept to set up, they still recognized this needs to be an episode of television. Like there's no first episode world building, second episode detective agency.
Yeah.
This is pretty much it.
That is a fascinating thing about a lot of pre-90s television, is that anybody writing an episode had to work in someone saying everybody's names. Like, you think of any individual episode of, say, Star Trek The Next Generation, the names of anybody who is, like, important in that episode will be said at some point early in the episode, or sort of when they first appear, as like, Counselor Troy, come in. It's like the sort of Captain's personal log. It's like Captain Picard's personal log. It's like sort of establishing certain things in Expo log, and yet not making it annoying for people who've seen it 8 billion times. Mm-hmm. I guess we know what the show will be.
Yeah.
We've seen it.
Yes, exactly. And we've seen the first episode rather than the pilot. So, gosh, it's still killing me that since the pilot was eventually reconfigured and released as an episode, I bet you it was never released in toto.
Yeah. Or it might be something. Apparently it tested very poorly.
Yeah. I'd be really curious to see what it was originally.
Yeah.
I definitely want to, at the very least, watch the episode that was released to glean what I can from that. But yeah, I'd be very, very curious to see that original pilot, if it is out there anywhere. Like, it might just, sometimes that sort of thing just doesn't exist 50 years later, Right.
Or it could be something that got released on a special edition DVD or something like that.
Yeah. If it still exists, if they didn't just like burn that, start over, you know. But anyway, let's move on to our next segment. Hey, it's that guy.
In this segment, we answer the question that appears in our mind when we go, I know you.
You're a thing I've seen before. I'm not imagining you right now. So we talk about whether we recognized any of the actors, if anyone's that guy, a character actor that we've seen before. Strangely, did you recognize anyone in this show?
Only the guy playing the evil Baron or whatever, Otto. Archduke. Theodore something. I'm totally forgetting. I looked him up. I've seen him in other things. He guested as sort of a villainous, a mustache twiddling villain type in things like Hogan's Heroes back in the day. He's sort of somebody who would appear. He was a recurring baddie on the Wild Wild West. Among other things, but nothing specific. It wasn't like seeing a famous role that he played where I'm like, aha, him.
Yeah.
He just kind of was
osmosis.
Yeah, we need this asshole.
Yeah.
And he would get hired to be that guy.
Yeah. Makes sense. He looked the part. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Were you familiar with the faces of the Monkees?
No.
No. Did any of them surprise you or look different from what you expected?
No, I've definitely seen pictures of them before, but there wasn't anything that was just like downright surprising. They all just kind of looked like if you had shown me a picture of 4 other guys with the same haircuts, wearing the same kind of clothes, and said this is a photo of the Monkees, I would have said yes. Also this. Yeah. Was one of them also in something else?
No, I was just really curious if you'd been like, oh, I think I actually have seen one of them do something else or whatever. To my knowledge, all 4 of them were mainly the Monkees. I mean, they all had solo careers post Monkees, certainly. But more as musicians than actors. Right. It's interesting. They definitely all were more musicians, and I don't know why you would know them from anything else. I was just curious. It seemed like a good time to mention whether their appearance was what you expected or if anything about that was like, oh, I thought there was one with a, I don't know. I thought there was one with a lazy eye. I don't know what I thought you were going to say.
I thought there was a bald one with an eye patch, It's like, exactly. Where was that guy?
Yeah. Should we move on then to our next segment?
I choose you.
In this segment, we talk about who our favorite character in the episode was, or somebody that we want to see more of, somebody we want to see grow and flourish, that kind of thing. Sarah, do you have anyone in particular in mind?
Well, I've already spoiled it. Mickey was always my favorite. I love the boys, but Mickey is the one who made me go like, that guy is cool. And I think that it really tracks throughout my other, my favorite of a foursome as a child. Like, Michelangelo was my favorite turtle. Mickey is my favorite monkey. It's like, they're all pretty goofy, but my impression was always that Mickey was the goofiest. Mm-hmm. Did you get that? Or did you feel like, why Mickey? They all seem pretty freaking goofy.
No, I got that. Yeah. I got that energy.
He's the first one who wears a costume and does a crazy voice.
Yeah. Big Chaos Gremlin energy from that one.
The Gremliniest! Sorry, I just like, yes, I did have a thing for Chaos Gremlins growing up, or at least like goofballs, it's true. Anyway.
Aside from the main 4, the guy playing the henchman of the Archduke in this was delightful. And I kind of I wish that there was a universe where he's a recurring villain and he always plays the villain's henchman. Yeah. So he's always like, I'll get those Monkees next week. Yeah. Because he was great. He did some wonderful physical comedy. He really mixed it up with the boys. He had good chemistry with them as well. Mm-hmm. The bit where they're trying to get him to stand a certain spot to have a safe fall on him. And
yes.
And then all of a sudden it cuts to him sitting in a chair and they're reading him a story.
Yeah.
And then they tie him up and then he gets out of the ropes and then he's not immediately like, I'll get you. He's like, aren't you going to finish the story?
He says are you going to read that story or are we going to play around? Yeah. Let's get down to brass tacks. Tell me how Snow White ends.
He's a lot of fun. I'd love to see more of that dude.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. All right, let's get on to our
final verdicts.
Did this first aired episode do the job of a pilot and make you want to watch more? Because clearly their original pilot did not in the 60s for people.
Yeah, no, I want to watch more because this has reminded me of like how goofy it is and how much I loved it as a child. And it definitely, it hit that nostalgia button real hard. And I want to see more of these boys and their shenanigans. But strangely, did it make you want to watch more?
I'm curious to see more. If we hadn't just also watched the Dick Van Dyke Show today, which absolutely knocked me on my ass. I was not expecting something like that. This might have been a bigger surprise. Because the Dick Van Dyke Show felt like a once-in-a-season discovery for me.
Yeah.
But that being said, this is delightful and charming. And if more of this comes my way, I would be very excited. This is something where I want to do a little digging and find out if they did have notable guest stars or like if people appeared on this in bit parts before they were famous. This really feels like the kind of thing where it's like a young I don't even know who, I'm totally like blanking on like sort of the right timeline, but it's like, you know, a teenage Steve Martin had a background part in the 35th episode or something, like that kind of thing. I would love to sort of track down some of that kind of stuff because similar to Dragnet that we watched a couple weeks ago, there's that feeling of this being such a specific cultural artifact from a very particular time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I feel like there might be weird fashion trends or flash in the pan dance styles or whatever that were like popular for one summer that made it into this show.
A weird stick that people put between their bodies and swing around.
Wow, Sarah, that's oddly specific.
Isn't it though? just search on YouTube for the ghost in the glass bikini. You will understand.
But something like that appearing in this, that would be really interesting to see.
Yeah.
In terms of needing more of the boys and everything like that, I don't have the nostalgia kick. So it's not something where I'm like, I must mainline more of this to feel this feeling more.
Sure.
But it's definitely something where I could see myself enjoying this quite a bit and seeing more. I do have access to a couple more episodes. I know the second episode is called Monkey See, Monkey Die.
Whoa!
Yeah,
all right.
This has escalated quickly, and I believe it turns into like sort of a cat and mouse FBI criminal profiler serial killer drama, and so I really want to check that out.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's not something where I'm immediately feeling an urge to watch more of it, but it's also something that is such a strong package. And again, the cultural artifact aspect of it is interesting to me. And the fact that it's really easy on the eyes and super fun doesn't hurt. You know, there's some things that are very much an artifact of their time, and it's like, I don't really want to watch more of that, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, as much as I think classic cinema is important, I'm never going to go watch Birth of a Nation. Don't really need to, don't really want to.
Some things do not need to be watched.
It is a cultural artifact of its time, but it's not one I need to engage with. But you know, to bring it back to the Monkees, it's like there are so many things, even in this episode, that are like, wow, yeah, that was people did that. Mm-hmm. Wow. I mean, just seeing rotary phones, I was like, oh, I used to have a rotary phone.
I love that there's an entire joke in it about princess phones being like, oh, there's a pun on princess phones. It's like, oh yeah, that was a style of phone that was very popular in the 60s. It's not a thing anymore.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's it. Do you have any last words about the Monkees?
Are you about to monkey die me?
Well, you've monkey seen me.
No. Do I have any last words? No, nothing to say. Just, I wish you had loved it as much as I do, but also it's very rare that you show something that you positively loved in your childhood and it hits the person you are showing in their 30s the same way that it hit you when you were 12. And I already got that experience with you with Wizard of Speed and Time, so I shouldn't be too greedy.
Yeah, and on a more positive note, at least there was nothing deeply traumatizingly problematic about this that you just didn't notice as a kid.
No. I mean, I'm glad that it still like tickled me the way that it tickled me before. Like, I'm still delighted by it, and that's a treasure in and of itself.
The real treasure was the monkeys we found along the way.
And on that note, bye.
Hey, we're the Pilot House.
Good job.
Thanks for listening to Pilot House. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Pilot House Pod. Visit our website, pilothousepodcast.com, or email us at pilothousepodcast@gmail.com to suggest future topics.
Please share this episode with a friend or rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It helps people find us.
Our podcast is entirely listener supported.
So thanks to our special guest stars, Cynthia, Tina, Juniper, and Jerry.
Visit patreon.com/pilothouse to find out how you can become a series regular.
Pilot House is a Herringbone Society production.
Hello? Hello. The streetcar is going up the hill.
The fox has stolen a chicken.
The onions ripen in the spring.
Especially when it is raining. Hello?
Especially when it's raining. What number is this, please?
Klondike 58618.
Oh, I must have dialed the wrong number. Sorry.